that loud enough for everybody? Good morning. My name is Christy Bea. My pronouns are she, her, and I will be your worship associate this morning. We are so delighted that you are joining us here today. In today's service, we are delighted to be hosting Liz James. It is going to be a unique and fun-filled service. We hope you enjoy it. Liz James is the founder of a 270,000 person online UU committee called the Unitarian Universalist Hysterical Society, the UUHS. Half of the Cracked Cup podcast and is working on a book with Skinner House Press. She also runs Mirth and Dignity, an organization devoted to supporting diverse expressions of Unitarian Universalism. She believes in a Unitarian Universalism that is filled with meaning and joy, and that sees change as an advantage. Liz has some opening words for us today. Please join me in welcoming her to the UUFF.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. It's so lovely and warm here. I'm from Canada. I've been having such a good time. Right before my opening words, I'm going to tell a very short story. In my travels through the United States, talking about humor and doing a somewhat funny sermon, I keep having this same conversation over and over again. During coffee hour, someone will sort of sidle up to me and they'll say, "It's important to laugh." And I'll say, "Yeah, I think so too." And they'll say, "Even with all the, it's important to laugh." And I always think, especially with all the, it's important to laugh. This conversation is always had in a hushed tone of voice that I imagine one reserves for selling and buying of drugs. It's like, and it sometimes feels a little bit sacrilegious to engage in humor when there's a lot of things going on. And I, as an outsider, as a Canadian, I'm not going to talk about any of the political things that are going on. I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist. And I want you to know I don't mean disrespect by that. I'm just honoring that people sometimes need a break. So, with that disclaimer in place, our opening words this morning are from Dan Savage. During the darkest days of the AIDS crisis, we buried our friends in the morning, we protested in the afternoon, and we danced all night. The dance kept us in the fight because it was the dance we were fighting for. It didn't look like we were going to win, and then we did. It doesn't feel like we're going to win now, but we could. Keep fighting, keep dancing.
Maddie will play for us now as we begin our service together.
The song we're about to play is one that you may recognize a part of. But it's been tailored to meet our needs at the moment. And Steve, take it away. Well, our congregation's growing and it's time to make a serious plan.
Serious plan now, serious plan now.
We need to make our pledges so our leaders will know where they stand
Know where
now.
we stand now, know where we stand now.
And have a platform and take a pencil into your hand
Into your
now.
hand now, into your hand now.
Funds, 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 when our programs can get underway.
Funds, 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 so our programs can get underway.
Funds, 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 so our programs can get underway.
Funds, 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 so our programs can get
But the
underway.
music's real fine, but the choir really needs some support
Need some
now.
support now, need some support now.
And already has more classes than we can report
We can
now.
report now, we can report now.
And David and Jackie and even Hannah Lori will shout now. And we'll need funds, 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 so our program can get underway. And we'll need funds, 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 so our programs can get underway. Our congregation's growing and it's time to make a serious plan now. We need to make our pledges so our leaders will know where they stand now. So grab a pledge form and take the pencil into your hand now. And we'll have funds, 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 so our programs can get underway.
So our programs can get underway.
Funds, 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 so our programs can get underway.
Funds, so our programs can get underway.
Great song. Thank you. Good morning. I'm Kurt Swinburne, and I can locate my badge, but I do have one. I'm chair of the Community Action and Justice Committee. I'm here to talk about the Pledge to Love, that is love of human rights. Without compassion for others, can we say that we really know about love? This fellowship has been involved with supporting human rights since its beginning. Environmental justice, green sanctuary participation, recycling reduction in energy use, dental care for the indigent, combating racism, workers' rights, marriage equality, payday lending, controlled fees, LGBTQ rights, immigrants' rights, support for quality public education, reproductive rights, supporting action to save our homeless shelter, and more. It can be said that the outreach this fellowship does for social justice addresses all 7 of the Unitarian Universalist principles: the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another and encouragement of spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience, and the use of democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and my favorite, respect for the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. We support our pledge of love to human rights by caring for others in our community and in the world. Thank you.
We are wrapping up our Pledge to Love month. In this month, we've been encouraging you not just to pledge your money, but also to pledge your love, to pledge your hearts into what we're trying to do here. We're trying to make this area a kinder and gentler place. Right now, this is an old slide. I think we are almost at 50%. Almost at 50%, which I hear is normal. So if you have not pledged yet, you win a phone call from me. All right. So you can be looking forward to that this week. If you have not pledged, it is absolutely not too late. Pledge forms are in the back. Please, please do that. If you pledged in the past, we need you more than ever this year. So I want to encourage you to give. Let's stand together. We're going to sing our Pledge to Love theme song one more time to close out our month. And I encourage you to join us in singing. Pledge to love, pledge to care. We can change the world if only we will dare. Pledge to serve, pledge to give. It's in loving that we find the strength to live. Thank you very much. You may be seated. Liz, come.
I invite people to come forward for the story for all ages. Particularly children might want to come forward, but anybody who likes the pictures. You won't get all the jokes if you can't see the pictures. Our story this morning is After the Fall by Dan Santat. So you're going to want to be somewhere where you can see the pictures really well, so you might spin right around and look up at that screen, is what I would suggest. Oop. And then I turned off my iPad. There we go. After the Fall by Dan Santat. My name is Humpty Dumpty. This was my favorite spot, high up on the wall, which, when you think about it, is a weird place for an egg to be. But I loved being so close to the birds. And then one day, I fell. I'm sort of famous for that part. Folks called it the Great Fall, which sounds quite grand. It was just an accident, but it changed my life. Fortunately, all the king's men managed to put me back together. Well, most of me. There were parts of me that couldn't be healed with bandages and glue. After that day, I became afraid of heights. I was so scared that it kept me from enjoying some of my favorite things. I walked past the wall every day, and I would think about climbing that ladder again. I really missed the birds and being high above the city, but I could never do it, because I know accidents can happen. I eventually settled for watching the birds from the ground. It wasn't the same, but it was better than nothing. And then one day, an idea flew by. Making paper planes was harder than I thought. It was easy to get cuts and scratches, but day after day, I kept trying and trying until I got it just right. My plane was perfect. It flew like nothing could stop it. I hadn't felt that happy in a long time. It wasn't the same as being up in the sky with the birds, but it was close enough. Unfortunately, accidents happen. They always do. I almost walked away again. But then I thought about all the time I'd spent working on my plane and all the other things that I'd missed, and I decided I was going to climb that wall. The higher I got, the more nervous I felt. I didn't want to admit it. I was terrified. I didn't look up. I didn't look down. I just kept climbing, one step at a time, until I was no longer afraid. And maybe now you won't think of me as an egg that was famous for falling. Hopefully, you'll remember me as an egg who got back up and discovered that he could fly. I invite you to go to your RE classrooms now. Just as I was beginning seminary, my congregation moved to a new building. I was on the board at the time, and I was also one of those busybodies with their nose in everything, and so I got involved somehow in renovating the space to make it suitable for Unitarian Universalists. First and foremost, this meant removing the giant cross from the front of the room. Now, if you're new, I want to clarify, UUs don't have a problem with crosses. We're not vampires. There are lots of people who are both UU and Christian, but there's lots who aren't too. And lifting up just one perspective like that, it was more Jesus than my congregation was looking for on a weekly basis. So, the theology of it was clear. We worked that out. But in practical terms, it turns out that wood is quite heavy. The phrase cross to bear is not just a metaphor. Getting the thing off the wall was a feat of engineering and a near-death experience, and now what? This giant cross wouldn't exactly fit in the back of my minivan. It would need to be cut into pieces, but you couldn't use the circular saw in the building because sawdust flies everywhere, and the building committee had already told me no more power saws in the sanctuary. It was an informal rule that was like on the verge of becoming a formal one. So this was the line of thinking that led me to a conversation with my friend Anne, who is a woman of great maturity and perspective. This is a sensitive time for your neighbors, Anne explained to me. With the loss of the old church that shrank down until they couldn't afford their building, your new neighbors will be grieving, but there's also potential for new connection, for inviting people in. And Liz, the community's introduction to Unitarian Universalism cannot be you taking a power saw to a cross on the front lawn of the old church. I'm not sure how that cross was dealt with in the end. For some reason, they didn't involve me any further, but it got done. But here's the thing. It had hung there for many years, beside the huge vaulted window from which light streamed down, and it's true what they say, light really does transform everything it touches, particularly on a timescale of years. And so sure enough, the paint around the cross had grown distinctly lighter, but the paint behind the cross had not. And so now, beside the pulpit, there was a clearly stenciled outline. We could have solved this by repainting, of course. But in order to do that, we would have had to agree on paint colors. And the decorating committee pointed out we couldn't choose the colors until the fabric for the new chairs that would replace the pews was chosen. And the worship committee felt that the pews couldn't be removed until we talked about how we embody our identity in the structure of our worship space, particularly when it comes to religious authority. And for many months, we did not worship beside a giant cross. Instead, we worshiped beside a very conspicuous shadow that was cast by its absence. A giant, metaphorical Jesus was here sign right up above our heads. In more ways than one. It was on the literal wall, of course. It was also in the conspicuous role that the Protestant tradition we come from plays in everything we do. It's in the tunes of the songs we sing, the idea of piano accompaniment, the format of a sermon, the fact that we're meeting on Sunday morning even. We've expanded our theology, but we keep embodying it in the same ways that we have for centuries. To me, the shadow of the cross on the wall on Sunday morning was a physical manifestation of a structure that was frozen in time. It said, we've decided to do things differently, but we aren't quite doing that yet because the details are still stuck in committee. So at around this time of the shadow of the cross business, I was also feeling personally stuck in committee myself. I was so in love with Unitarian Universalism and its values, and I was expressing that love by going to seminary, where we talked about this shadow of the cross stuff. We didn't use that language, but we talked a lot about how quickly society is changing and how we might be able to change to meet those changes. We talked about modern needs and how we might expand our structures. But we had those conversations in a university, mirroring the old ways of doing things with every detail of our structure, with all the expense that goes with academia and the inertia. And by approaching the issue just from that perspective, we were trying to take down the cross while still functioning within the confines of its shape. I sucked at all of this, by the way. Even when I am not critiquing the premise of school, which I often am, I am a terrible student. Forcing my brain to study has always felt like trying to wrestle an active toddler into a car seat. I had long since received an ADHD diagnosis, which is the medical term for the whole toddler car seat situation. And I had received medication and behavior suggestions, and of course I'd been receiving the messages that go with this all my life. At that time, I thought of myself as disordered and the wrong shape for academia. But I loved UUism, and I wanted to serve it, and this was how you did it. So I was determined to squeeze into the shape of what was asked of me. Like, sometimes I was determined. On my better behaved days, I was determined. On my less disciplined days, I would skip the books and the sermons we were supposed to be paying attention to, and I would do what I love to do, which is laugh. I remember one day I was procrastinating on my homework, watching these comedians on YouTube, and I thought, hey, wait a second. They're talking about the exact same ideas as the people in the books I'm reading are talking about. Big topics, often really tricky ones. Stand-up comedians, they will tackle it all. Religion, money, race, ethics. But they do it in a way that's funny and accessible, a way that's easy to pay attention to. This was the beginning of a doorway in me. Maybe the fact that I had trouble paying attention to academia wasn't just a flaw. Maybe it was also what would equip me to have conversations about the same things that ministers do, but in a way that's a little easier to pay attention to. A way that would make space for people who are like me. And so the farther I moved from the powerless position of a grade school child, the more assertive that line of thinking became. I would sit in my school lectures and the usual messages would run through my head. The problem is that I need to be better at paying attention. But now there was a voice that argued back. That argued, how come I'm always working harder to pay attention? I've been working as hard as I can to pay attention for years. How come this guy doesn't have to work any harder at being easy to pay attention to, huh? When it wasn't dry, the stuff I was learning was also not what I had expected. I had always had these stories in my head, like that of Michael Servetus, the Unitarian martyr, chased and persecuted and ultimately burned at the stake for his brave act of speaking the truth to John Calvin. So it turns out, when you read Servetus's writings in his own words, he's very smart, he's articulate, he's definitely brave. He's also quite obnoxious. He doesn't just tell his truth, he stalks John Calvin. He writes him letters arguing every little point. He writes and distributes books about Calvin. At one point, Calvin has a warrant out for Servetus's arrest. Servetus goes to one of his talks and sits in the front row like this. He was like the worst internet troll, but in real life. Now, Servetus didn't deserve what happened to him, of course. Nobody deserves that. After reading his actual words, though, dripping with arrogance and condescension, there was like this little part of me that sympathized with Calvin's urge to get rid of him. I mean, I know that guy. I've chaired meetings containing that guy. Sometimes I am that guy. He is the best of us in some ways and the worst of us in others. Or Emerson and Thoreau, that's another one from our history. I had always admired the transcendentalists, how they forged these intentional, beautiful lives full of integrity. Learning a bit more about it, Thoreau could retreat to the woods to suck the marrow out of life because he was living on land Emerson gave him for free. Where'd the land come from originally, Thoreau? The story about how you're making the bold choice to live simply in the woods? I think that we could say that Thoreau didn't invent the idea of living that way. In fact, before Thoreau's people arrived, simple was pretty much the only way anybody ever lived in those woods. There was this whole system that was supporting Thoreau. He had no kids to take care of, he had his free land, and we're pretty sure that Emerson's wife did his laundry. Louisa May Alcott, meanwhile, was living a few miles away, making all the same theological points about simplicity and intentionality and virtue in what became her best-selling novel, Little Women, but she wrote in a way that wasn't academic. She told stories. While her dad sat in the study talking philosophy with Thoreau and Emerson, he didn't work for much of Louisa's life, Louisa got to work writing. In a world not built for women to have a voice, she found a way to have one. In a world not built for women to earn, she found a way to feed her family with that voice. And she did all of that while doing her own laundry. So you can hear my frustration a little bit. I wasn't the only one. We malcontents found one another and we bonded, and then we used our pent-up irritation and our esoteric knowledge to play witty and very historically specific pranks on each other. So one time, some of our friends who ran a UU housing cooperative in Boston posted online that they were accepting applications for new roommates. A few of us applied as variously dead Unitarian and Universalists. We applied as Emerson, listing Thoreau under pets. We applied as Michael Servetus. Under food allergies, we listed barbecue. I'm not endorsing it, I'm just telling you what happened. We also applied as the people that we thought were missing from our mainstream history, too. Reverend Olympia Brown, the first woman in the US to be ordained. Dorothy Dix, whose tireless lobbying transformed conditions for institutionalized peoples in the US, Canada, and several other countries. These women aren't our best known heroes, but when you line their lives up against Thoreau in the woods or Servetus with his letters, you can't deny their stories deserve just as much acknowledgement. The housing co-op wrote back and invited us for an interview, which was going to be tricky. They did caution us, however, that some housemates may not have experience in living with the dead and may require education on matters of corporeal privilege. All of this was followed by a week of messaging and coordinating and giggling and pranking that left me feeling warm and connected. Connected with my peers, with my UU heritage, gently poking fun at the things I thought deserved to be knocked down a peg or two, and lifting up stories that aren't always told. The prank connected me with my values, too, as we coordinated to know just how far to push things while keeping it funny for everybody involved. After all of it, the prank left me feeling a part of Unitarian Universalism. We understood the shared jokes because they arose out of shared stories and values. I mean, corporeal privilege, how UU is that? This was a space that had room for me, where I didn't have to change shape to fit into a prescribed shadow. I didn't want it to end. And so on a whim, I created a Facebook group and I named it the UU Hysterical Society. It's a play on the UU Historical Society, who have changed their name like twice since then, so nobody ever gets my joke. People usually just point out that the word hysterical has a troublesome history, used as a weapon to discredit and sometimes harm women. And they're right. Throughout history, the symptoms of hysteria have been varied. Sometimes it was a woman who was struggling with what we now call a mental illness or a disability. Sometimes it was a physical condition like epilepsy or a life choice like deciding not to get married. Often it was a woman who was unwilling or unable to toe the line in some way. Hysteria was a catch-all word for a woman who must be treated, who was being inconvenient. a hysterical woman is a woman who's the wrong shape. And I, who was struggling so hard to fit into the shadow of the cross, I loved my UU Hysterical Society. It was an expression of my values. It was a space that fit me. It was a break from the ministerial formation process at a time when that process was starting to break me. For years, I didn't think of it as anything more than my own personal refuge. By the time I clued into what was going on, we had about 20,000 members. Someone posted that she nearly drove her car off the road after spotting a UU church. She said she thought we were a joke religion made up for the purposes of the UU Hysterical Society, and that seeing a real UU church was like spotting a unicorn. She almost drove her car off the road yelling, "They're real! They're real!" And I thought, oh wow, we could be telling 20,000 people about what Unitarian Universalism is. And then I thought, oh, words you can't say on Sunday morning. Because I'm not the right person to represent UUism on that kind of scale. I didn't finish the assigned reading. That should be a job for, official people, like a minister or someone involved with the UUA, something like that. Not for some random seminary dropout. Fortunately, I didn't have to be the right person for the job. A religious educator named Kathy joined the team at that time and was able to fill in the gaps. And together we stewarded the group as it continued to grow. And I toyed with the idea that maybe we should become something more, specifically maybe a legal entity that could apply for grants to fund all the work Kathy was putting in. But even thinking along those lines felt presumptive. Like, who did I think we were? It was not a rhetorical question. I had no idea who we were or why we were doing what we were doing. And then in November of 2019, something happened that changed my perspective on this forever. My friend Reverend Mibutsa Ndadijimana approached me for help raising money to settle a group of refugees. In November of 2019, the Hysterical Society held its first charity fundraiser. It was holiday themed because Christmas, refugees, those go together. We sold funny PDFs like labels for wine that said, "Hey, this was water a minute ago." My favorite was a tag that said, "It's the thought that counts, and I way overthought this." We sold flasks that said, "For when thoughts and prayers are not enough," still useful today. And "This is my spiritual practice," which is a pun in two ways. If you want a flask of your own, by the way, we are still raising money for refugees in development, and they're available by donation to that project. But back in 2019, our holiday fundraiser raised more than $16,000, which was more than I would have imagined for a group on the internet. And so on one of my trips, arms full of flasks, because you have to declare at the post office what you're sending across the border, the post office guy said, "Okay, I'll bite. What's with the flasks?" And he looks at the return address. "What is a hysterical society?" I didn't respond how I usually do when asked what I do for a living. Normally I mumble, "I run a Facebook group that makes fun of my religion." This is not a very accurate answer, but it usually ends the conversation. Instead, I lifted my head up and I grinned and I answered with confidence. And I said we were a group that was about joy and community and refugees. We had started gathering around laughter, which is a good in and of itself. It's like a soup kitchen for the soul. But we were slowly turning into more than that. We were still about laughter and community, but also about bringing dignity to people who deserved a chance to build a new life. The Canadian not-for-profit Mirth and Dignity was incorporated the following month. To this day, all of our profit from our merchandise goes to the charity Mibutsa founded. But most of what we do is offer support for forms of Unitarian Universalism that are not supported by our traditional institutions. We started with the UU Hysterical Society. As that became independent, we started supporting a board game ministry, and then there was a thing on TikTok and a comedy podcast, and most recently online soulful singing, all of which are UU projects. I could go on and on about this, but this is not an infomercial. You do not need this much details unless you share our vision of UUism beyond traditional structures, in which case you might want to become one of the people who support supports us with a $5 a month pledge. Okay, now I'm done. For now, what I actually want to draw your attention to is the overarching arc of this story. That feeling of not quite fitting, which is, I find, a feeling that UUs can empathize with. Many of us became UU because we didn't fit into the communities we were born into. We figured out how to be diverse theologically, and I believe we are also right now in a process of creating structural diversity, a bunch of different ways to be Unitarian Universalist. We have together inherited a shadow of a cross, a set of institution and practices that define real religion that don't always work for modern congregations. I've heard from people who feel like they're tired, they're trying to do too much, there's not enough money, and they feel focused on the wrong things. In our churches and in our larger society, we are working ourselves to exhaustion, and it's just not doing the trick. Maybe we don't need to work harder. Maybe we've already been working as hard as we can for years. What if this pressure doesn't mean what we think it does? What if we're not cracking because we're breaking, but because we are turning into something different, changing, shaping something new? I have no idea where that would lead. I don't have a specific plan any more than I had a specific plan when playing that prank in 2015. But I do know from this experience that the first step is to give ourselves permission to be who we are, not who we think we're supposed to be or who we've always been. What would we do differently if we saw ourselves as hatching? What if it were an adventure? As the Leonard Cohen song tells us so beautifully, ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There are cracks in everything. That's how the light gets in. And I think that's true, but it's not the whole picture. The cracks are how the light gets in, yes, but sometimes the cracks are where the light gets out. The cracks are where the hatching starts.
We're going to pass around a microphone. Do you have some questions you would like to ask Liz? She's agreed to field some questions. Who would like to kick us off? All right here. Microphone's coming. It is coming. It is coming. It is coming. All right, here we go.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I am a member of the Hysterical Society.
Cool.
I discovered it from a friend of mine who I'm pretty sure is not a UU. I know she's never come to this church, but she lives nearby, so I don't know where she found it, but I saw it and I thought it was extremely funny, and so I joined.
Oh, cool. Wonderful.
So, thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful to hear. Thanks.
What is your favorite UU joke?
I'm really partial to, we have it's actually a magnet that we sell that says, this is not a question so much as a comment, traditional UU proverb, which I quite like. I think that's probably my favorite. Good question.
Well, with that prompt, I can't help but contribute my Unitarian joke about the dyslexic insomniac Unitarian who lies awake at night wondering if there really is a dog. But just to sort of say, as you know, I'm in the medical field, and how much humor is needed there. There used to be an organization called Clown Alley, and they did rounds at the hospital on Saturday mornings, and I went with them one time, and they were great. But we need more of that in healthcare. And, you know, and there's a lot of evidence, good scientific evidence, that laughter and mirth and is good for healing.
Absolutely.
So you're doing a good job. You'll make us all better.
This is a shameless plug for the newsletter, which is coming out this week. My article is about laughter, and I'm getting older. My face is falling off. You know, it's same as your boobs falling down.
Yep.
But laugh wrinkles are so much more attractive than frown wrinkles. So I'm trying to.
Only in a Unitarian church can your chairman of your board of trustees talk about her boobs.
Falling down.
We all know.
Who else has a comment? Yeah, right down here. Yeah, David. If you've got a UU joke, please share it.
Yeah.
I have to pass this on because I think it's the funniest thing, and it's really not related here, but Mary Tyler Moore show I used to love with Ted Baxter, and there is an episode, you've got to watch it, you really got to watch it. It's Ted Baxter meets Walter Cronkite. It's Ted Baxter meets Walter Cronkite, and I swear I've watched it 100 times, and there's a laugh every 30 seconds, not every minute. So there's at least 30 to 60 funny things in this. So you go watch it too. Also watch another episode where she writes unbeknowingly obituaries that went to the wrong ones or whatever. Anyway, Mary Tyler Moore was really funny.
Time for a couple more. Anybody else? Anybody else have a joke? Anybody else have a comment or a question?
If you would like to have some fun, watch a movie on Netflix called Miss Congeniality. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's starring Sandra Bullock, and she's in the Miss America contest. She's an FBI agent, and it's her job to keep them from bombing the pageant. And it's hilarious. You will laugh every moment at the end where she's trying to steal the crown from Miss America because it has a bomb in it. Anyway, I credit Karen Calais for passing on the recommendation of this, and if you want to laugh, watch Miss Congeniality.
I've seen it. I can second that. I found it really funny too.
We really do want world peace.
I just wanted to say I read recently that just, to Kit's comment, just putting your face in the form of a smile will raise your mood. So in these days when there's so many things bringing your mood down, I've taken to just walking around smiling. I think sooner or later it's going to have a good effect.
It's a really interesting study, actually, where they had them do math problems holding a pencil like this, or holding a pencil like this. So they didn't know that they were imitating smiling or frowning, and it still made a significant difference to mood. So that was kind of interesting.
This is this is more of a comment than a question.
Excellent.
First, I've been listening, so I just wanted to say, if you're looking for a funny movie about religion, the movie Saved. If you've never seen it, it stars Mandy Moore and Macaulay Culkin. It's about a Christian school, and it makes fun of Christianity the entire time. So if you're looking for that, that's that one. Also, my grandmother was a UU, and that's the first place I ever heard of UU. And she was one of the funniest people I've ever met. And she used to tell me, because I didn't know what UU was, she used to say, Jackie, it's just a place where we don't care what you believe as long as you believe something, and you're nice to people. Don't be an asshole.
Yep.
And so that's kind of the thought that I had when I came in here. And then lastly, for those of you who don't know, hi everybody, I run the youth sanctuary for our LGBTQ kids, and we had Fredericksburg Pride come this Friday to check us out. And the woman, Lindsay, had never been to UU, and she didn't know what UU was. and she said she was terrified to come to a church because someone told her it was at a church. And then I'm giving her the tour and showing her everything and talking about it, and she was like, "Oh my God, this is a happy place." Who knew? And so I just wanted everyone, thank you for keeping it my happy place. David offered the building for my daughter's birthday, and I told him absolutely not, because I would have to invite my ex-wife to my happy place, and that's that's not happening. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And thank you that you like to laugh. That's one of the best things about coming here. UUs are kind of a unicorn, I think. I think we really are. I think we have something very special here. So thank you for being a part of that. All right, quick announcements. Here we go. Next Sunday, if you would like to become a member of our fellowship, this is the best and easiest way to do it. Come to the UU 101 class. Next Sunday, right after this service, you can come, and Kit will teach you. I promise she won't mention her boobs, not once. Also, next Sunday at 2 o'clock, our very own Maddie is going to be putting on a concert. This is a fundraiser for our fellowship. If you would like to come, you can come to the service and then go grab some lunch and then come back here at 2 o'clock. She's got about 15 songs that she's dying to play for you. It's going to be a great time. So I encourage you to come back for that and help us raise a little money. March the 15th is a Saturday, and that's our next fellowship together. That's a Saturday night. It's a lucky potato, so we encourage you to come. You bring the toppings and the desserts, and we'll bring the potatoes. Also, you bring board games, and we'll sit around. We'll have some fun baked potatoes, and we'll play some board games together, and I'm sure we will laugh as well. Yes. All right, joys and concerns. Christy, come share.
Okay. We have a joy to share this morning. Let me open it up here, because I've been worrying with the paper. I probably meant. There we go. Steve Walk has a joy to share today. It's actually, he says, reminder, February 28th, economic blackout to protest scaling back of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. See Google. And I have a joy today, and that is that somebody in the congregation today is wearing a watch and is moving their hand around, and there's a little white dot that keeps zooming up the wall and around the room. And I keep thinking, if my cats were here, they'd have so much fun. So we do not have any written concerns today. And I'm going to now ask everybody to stand if you are able. If you would like to contribute financially to this fellowship, we invite you to quietly go to the back and place your gift in the offering basket, which is located near the rear exit. If you have enjoyed today's service and want to see this fellowship grow and continue to be a positive light in our community, then I encourage you to give generously to support us. Perhaps this morning you have a private joy or concern on your heart. If so, we invite you to silently come up and place a pebble into the bowl of water as a token of what you are holding in your heart. We will close our service momentarily.
we're going to close our service this morning by singing together "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple." I encourage you, if you feel comfortable, reach out, grab somebody's hand, and let's sing together. "'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free." "'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, to be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn will be our delight, to by turning we come round. Thank you for coming. Have a great day.